Anyone arriving in a Chinese city today feels like they have stepped into a time machine. There are huge airports, elevated highways, skyscrapers that glow at night, and trains that glide faster than many airplanes. In less than 4 decades, China has built a landscape that seems straight out of science fiction. But this leap forward is no accident. There is a plan, firmly led by the Communist Party, in which every road, every factory, and even every app is part of something much bigger. Want to know what that plan is? Today, Bello Mundo will reveal the obscure reality of why China is living in 2049. If you had flown over China in the late 70s, you would have seen a country almost frozen in time. The landscape was one of endless rice fields, villages with low roofs, and dirt roads cutting through the countryside. More than 80% of the population lived in the countryside, farming with simple methods, without modern machinery. That's right. At that time, more than 8 out of 10 Chinese lived in the countryside. These were people who spent their entire days tending rice paddies and simple vegetable gardens. Cities were few and far between. For most people, life revolved around survival, and poverty was the rule, not the exception. It was in this scenario that Deng Xiaoping appeared, a short leader, soft-spoken but with bold ideas. In 1978, he launched the opening reforms. The logic was curious. Instead of closing its doors, the government decided to open a few controlled gaps to see what would happen. And so the special economic zones were born, hand-picked places to experiment with capitalism with Chinese characteristics. In these areas, foreign companies were invited to set up factories, bring technology, and create jobs. In return, they received incentives and infrastructure. It was as if the government had opened small windows of modernity within a country that still lived in the past. The impact was impressive. In just 3 decades, China jumped from just over 170 cities to more than 700. Today, there are 18 megacities, each with more than 10 million inhabitants. It was as if the country had planted metropolises in series. Among them all, one became a symbol. Shenzhen in the south, close to Hong Kong. Until the late 70s, it was just a fishing village. The smell of fish, nets drying on the beach, simple boats heading out to sea. When it earned the title of First Special Economic Zone, it became a laboratory for the future. In a few decades, this city has become the Chinese Silicon Valley, home to giants such as Huawei, Tencent, and DJI. Today, it has over 17 million inhabitants, more people than many entire countries. And it wasn't just Shenzhen. Cities like Shanghai, Chongqing, and Guangzhou also skyrocketed. Roads, waterways, bridges, and colossal hydroelectric dams, such as the Three Gorges Dam, changed the landscape forever. More than 1 million people were relocated so that the project could be built. The country showed that it was willing to change even the course of rivers to move forward. But the reason was never just to become big. Behind this spectacle of growth, there is a dark side that few talk about. And it is this side that you will begin to discover from now on. If cities grew at an almost unbelievable speed, life within them also changed. And perhaps the biggest shock for those visiting China today is in their pockets, or rather, the absence of them. Cash has practically disappeared. Even plastic cards, so common in the West, seem outdated. In everyday life, almost everything happens through an app installed on your cell phone. The most famous is WeChat, created by the giant Tencent. It started out as a simple messenger, similar to WhatsApp, but grew to become a true digital Swiss Army knife. There you can chat with friends, order food, pay bills, renew documents, call a taxi, schedule a doctor's appointment, and even deal with government bureaucracy. It's a mix of WhatsApp, Facebook, Uber, a bank, and a notary all in one place. Another dominant app is Alipay, linked to the Alibaba Group. It is also a digital wallet widely used in e-commerce and everyday purchases. Between them, they account for more than 90% of all mobile payments in the country. We are talking about around 1 billion people who practically live without using cash or cards. The scene is curious for any foreigner. You get in a taxi, show the code on your cell phone, and that's it. You buy fruit at the street market, and the seller already has the QR code stuck to their stall. Even donations to temples or tips for street performers are made with cell phones. According to official data, cash now accounts for less than 4% of all financial transactions in the country. In other words, China has practically jumped straight into a digital economy. This practicality is impressive, but it also reveals another side of China's future. Because it's not enough to have a digital life if travel between these giant cities is slow. That is why the government has invested heavily in another technological showcase: high-speed trains. In just over 10 years, China has built the largest railway network of its kind on the planet. Today, about 2/3 of the world's high-speed rail network is within the country. These trains easily reach 200 miles per hour and connect megacities in a few hours. The trip between Beijing and Shanghai, for example, which could take more than 10 hours by car, can be made in just over 4 hours by train. For the Chinese, it's part of their routine. For visitors, it seems like something out of fiction. While in many countries the debate over whether or not to have a bullet train has been dragging on for decades, in China they are already seen as common means of transportation. This infrastructure has shrunk distances across the mainland, brought cities closer together, and redrawn the economic geography. But this is where an uncomfortable question begins to arise. If everything works so fast, so connected, and so practical, what happens to all this generated information? Who controls this data and these movements? This is where the dark side of the project begins to appear. While technology makes life easier and trains shorten distances, it has also transformed China into the most surveilled country on the planet. It is impossible to walk through a large city without being filmed. It is estimated that there are around 700 million cameras scattered across the territory, equivalent to one camera for every 2 people. This equipment is not just there to record robberies or accidents. It is part of a centralized system nicknamed Skynet, in an ironic reference to the movie The Terminator. In it, each image captured is processed by artificial intelligence software. The cameras recognize faces even when covered by masks, identify each person's gait, and cross-reference information with government databases. In practice, this means that if someone stands too long in front of a public building or crosses paths with a person under surveillance, the system issues an automatic alert. Police officers do not need to patrol every corner because there is a command center that monitors everything in real time and dispatches patrol cars only when necessary. This monitoring does not stop on the streets. Inside cell phones, conversations, payments, and posts can also be tracked. WeChat and Alipay, which simplify everyday life, are also valuable sources of data for the state. It is as if each transaction leaves a trail that the government can follow whenever it wants. The impact of this is twofold. On the one hand, crime rates have fallen significantly over the last decade. The country is now considered one of the safest in the world, and many Chinese people report feeling protected, knowing that technology is keeping an eye on them. On the other hand, there is a growing sense of living under constant surveillance, as if every step is being watched. For some, it means security. For others, suffocation. And it is precisely at this point that the narrative takes on another layer. Because behind this network of cameras and apps is also the engine that fuels the greatest economic transformation in recent history. Few countries have grown so fast in such a short time. Since the late 70s, China has gone from being a rural and isolated nation to becoming the second largest economy on the planet. For 3 decades, the country has averaged nearly 10% growth per year. This pace was only possible thanks to a well-defined strategy, opening the doors to foreign industries, offering abundant and cheap labor, and at the same time investing in infrastructure on a gigantic scale. This is how it earned the nickname the world's factory. Entire Western companies moved their production lines to Chinese cities, taking advantage of low costs. But the story didn't end there. The government used this initial momentum to fund technical education, research, and strategic sectors. The result was a quantum leap. Whereas it had previously exported clothing and toys, China began to target cutting-edge technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, electric vehicles, and biotechnology. Programs such as Made in China 2025 were created to make it clear that the goal was to take the global lead in areas of high innovation. At the same time, Beijing began to extend its reach outward. The so-called New Silk Road brought Chinese capital to build roads, ports, and power plants in dozens of countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. This movement secured access to oil, grain, and ore, and opened markets for Chinese products. For some analysts, it is a form of modern neocolonialism. For others, just the Chinese version of commercial expansion. The fact is that the country's presence in the world has grown at record speed, and internally, the impact has been enormous. In the 80s, almost 90% of the population lived in extreme poverty. 40 years later, that rate has fallen to less than 1%. Hundreds of millions of people now have access to housing, electricity, schools, and transportation. It was one of the largest reductions in poverty ever recorded in human history. But this economic miracle did not come without a cost. To keep up the pace, millions of workers faced grueling hours known as 996, from 9 in the morning to 9 at night, 6 days a week. This was the routine in many factories and technology companies. The economic miracle that impressed the world was sustained by enormous human sacrifices. And the costs did not stop in the workplace. The environment also paid a very high price. For decades, pollution was the invisible price of growth. Coal, the basis of China's energy matrix, fueled factories and cities, but it also filled the air with smoke. In 2005, estimates pointed to millions of deaths directly linked to air quality. In cities like Beijing, it was common to see the sky covered by a gray haze so thick that schools had to suspend outdoor activities. In addition, gigantic projects reshaped the map and the landscape. In cities like Beijing, it was common to see the sky covered by a gray haze so dense that schools had to suspend outdoor activities. In addition, gigantic projects reshaped the map and the lives of millions of people. The most emblematic case was the Three Gorges Dam on the Yangtze River, which we mentioned at the beginning of the video. To build the world's largest hydroelectric dam, more than 1 million inhabitants were forced to leave their homes. Entire villages disappeared underwater. Many of those who were relocated received little or no support, and even today there are those who criticize the way this displacement was conducted. Another mark of this rapid progress are the so-called ghost towns, planned urban complexes with modern buildings and wide avenues that took years to attract residents. They are proof that in the Chinese model, building first and filling in later is part of the logic of growth. And behind this machinery is the Communist Party, which functions not only as a government, but as a kind of CEO of a company called China. Although the country declares itself socialist, in practice it adopts a peculiar mixture of political communism and economic capitalism. There are private companies and even billionaires, but the hand of the state is present in most large corporations. It is estimated that about 2/3 of the economy has some degree of state participation. In this system, individuals can get rich, but always within the limits imposed by the collective. Freedom of expression is controlled, independent strikes are not allowed, and the press operates under censorship. The logic is stability first, growth second, and individual rights third. It is an unspoken social pact, but one that sustains the discipline necessary to carry out long-term plans without political interruptions. While many people still associate China with cheap factories, the country is already showing that it wants to occupy another place on the board. Some of its companies have become global leaders in strategic sectors. Huawei has become a benchmark in telecommunications and competes with Western giants. BYD has gained worldwide prominence in the production of electric vehicles. DJI dominates almost the entire drone market. And TikTok, which started as a Chinese short video app, has gained billions of users and changed the way content is consumed around the world. These advances did not come about overnight. They are part of a long-term strategy guided by the Communist Party. The first major milestone was celebrated in 2021 when the party turned 100 years old and announced that extreme poverty had been eliminated. And in 2025, China once again attracted attention. At the Grand Military Parade in September, we saw aircraft flying in formation, troops marching in impeccable synchrony, state-of-the-art nuclear missiles, and a whole display of pomp and circumstance. It was not just a formal event, it was a show of force, a direct message about discipline, technological power, and the ability to send a message to the world. And that message points to the next milestone. In 2049, when the People's Republic of China will celebrate its 100th anniversary, the official goal is to present itself as the strongest country on the planet. Prosperous, modern, a leader in science, innovation, and culture, with a consolidated middle class and ambitious goals such as carbon neutrality, leadership in artificial intelligence, and advances in space exploration. The path to get there is impressive but also costly. Limited civil rights, exhausting working hours, mass displacement, and profound environmental impacts are all part of the equation. For the government, the sacrifice is worth the result. For many citizens, national pride compensates for the difficulties. And for those observing from the outside, the question remains: is China a model of efficiency to be followed, or a warning about the price of progress? What is certain is that the Chinese clock is already set. It points firmly to 2049. So, what did you think of this story? Do you believe China will really reach the top? Leave your opinion in the comments. If you liked the video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes of Bello Mundo. And try using the new Hype video feature. It really helps the channel reach more people and continue bringing you unbelievable content like this.